Hey everybody. Well, we've talked a lot about how to get our gear in order and our pack in order and all the things that we're going to take on our through hike in order. Not a lot of folks are talking about how to get the home front in order. So today we'll talk about a pre-deployment checklist. So one of the reasons that a lot of folks probably aren't talking about getting the home front in order and a pre-deployment checklist is because folks already have access to this information or they already have their home front in order. And conversely, it can sound sort of preachy speaking about some of these issues. But we're going to risk that and just run through real quickly some considerations that I've gone through and that may be something for you to consider prior to your beginning a through hike. So the marker for this is 6 weeks out, which is where I find myself. But I do want to talk about prior to 6 weeks first. So prior to 6 weeks out, the primary focus are on legal, financial, work-related, and reservations that may need to be made well in advance of your through hike. So the first thing is, for folks who haven't been in the military or other services where deployment overseas or other sort of higher risk assignments may have required them to either have a will or have a family trust or consolidate their financial information and designate a power of attorney or an executor and that sort of thing. Some people don't like to talk about these issues if they're not faced with it, and it's not a requirement. And this may be the first instance for some folks that says, I'm about to engage in a higher risk activity. I mean, we had a gentleman this last year, I think in his 50s, went up to New England and ended up having a heart attack or something, and died as a consequence. I mean, we're putting our bodies through long-term stress, and we're taking risks that frankly are not common. So as a consequence, we need to make sure that in the unlikely event of something tragic happening, either with us or back home, that things are properly in order. So the first issue let's get to is legal. Legal comes down to a couple of things. First and foremost, it comes down to a power of attorney. Who are you empowering to represent you for insurance issues, for tax issues, for will issues, for those legal, government, or financial issues that may need to be addressed in your absence? One avenue of that is a power of attorney. Are you designating somebody to serve in your stead? If not, do you have the legal framework to define your wishes? That could be your will for financial distribution of your assets. It could be a living will about what medical courses of action you wish or don't wish to be taken. It certainly means providing someone with your financial records so that they are able to quickly identify those assets if need be. So as I said, could be of a power of attorney, could be a will, could be a living will, could be simply hiring an attorney to serve either the interests of your family or even to serve as an executor. I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but the short of it is that legal counsel and advice you need to have if you haven't had it prior to 6 weeks out. The next thing is financial. The simplest form is putting down in writing what accounts and assets that you have and may need to be accessed in some emergency. But it also means making sure that your direct deposit and your automated bill paying is in place to not further burden either your spouse or your facilitator or your supporter while you're out on trail. and terminating those accounts that you no longer need, whether they're simply magazine subscriptions or they're more significant accounts. So on the financial side, it's sort of tightening things up and getting them consolidated. It's making sure that your facilitator or supporter, whoever you have designated to watch your affairs on trail, have the information that they need. Medical. Sometimes for some appointments, the medical may be something that you have to schedule out quite a ways, particularly if you're dealing with a specialist like a dermatologist or an oncologist, cardiologist, or whatever it happens to be. So getting those appointments, as well as making sure that you have the proper legal framework for your wishes, whether it's a living will or whatever it is. Finally, the fourth thing are the reservations that you will need for travel. Pretty much everybody, in my instance, I have to travel both to the States, and then once I'm in the States, then I have to travel down to Atlanta and then up to Amicalola Falls. So all of those reservations, getting my facilitator on board and making sure that the timing works for that individual and all those reservations and everything are completed. Better off to have that done, more than 6 weeks out. Okay, so 6 weeks out, really the most important thing that you can do to get your home front in order is to establish your communication systems and your communication plan. Nothing can be more disruptive to the success of a through hike and to maintaining the relationships, either with your supporter, which obviously may be a spouse or something, or your facilitator, than communication. So it's up to you, obviously, what systems you use. If you're going to use an inReach or a Spot or one of the GPS locating devices, you need to have an account with those systems. So as a consequence, you need to get that squared away. 6 weeks out is a good time to do that. Similarly, consideration of your cellular phone plan. For example, I was on T-Mobile. T-Mobile blows on the best of days. It certainly is not a good service to use on the AT. So I went with Verizon. Verizon seems to have the best coverage on the AT right now, but I think AT&T is also supposed to be pretty good, considering what your cell phone coverage is going to be for routine communication. That needs to be done early enough so that you get those accounts set up and are not racing at the last minute to have those services. In addition to the infrastructure of your communication system, you need to have a communication plan. And the first and foremost with that is sitting down with your supporter and your facilitator. So I mention these two individuals because obviously they may not be the same. For somebody with a spouse living domestically, maybe easy access to the trail or the area, then your supporter, like your spouse, may also serve as your facilitator. But like in my instance, we live overseas. My wife is going to continue to be overseas while I'm on trail. So while she's my support structure, she can't be my facilitator. So I have a separate facilitator who's going to help me with my mail drops and with other requirements that may come up during the course of the through hike. So again, just to be clear, I'm using these terms, supporter or facilitator, independently, maybe the same individual. In either instance, you need to have a sit down with that individual and a communication plan agreement. And what I mean by that is nothing will destroy a relationship faster in the absence of your presence than for either your supporter or your facilitator to think that they are going to receive communication at particular times and then not receive it, because it causes stress, worry, isolation. So whether you're going to do just sign of life once a week, like a text, whether you're going to call every day that you have service, or you're going to text every day when you have service, whatever it is that works for you, agree to that and follow that so that the expectation and the reality align themselves better. You can obviously adjust it while you're on trail when it's like, you know, hey, I don't have as much access as I thought I would, or I have more access so I can communicate more frequently, whatever it is. But you need to have an agreement so that you don't immediately insert stress into these important relationships early on. The other piece of that is a call tree. So a call tree is simply to ensure that if there's a change of status in your through hike, it could be a medical, it could be just a decision that you're coming off trail, it could be financial issues or tax issues or legal issues. If there's a change of status, that each person who's important to you knows that they will be informed with this change of status. So those two pieces of the communication. One is the system, and two is sort of the plan. Going back to a couple issues that you addressed prior to 6 weeks. First is legal. So at about the 6-week period of time, it's good to move those documents that are necessary for your facilitator or your support structure so that they have them. So if you have like a deposit box that you're going to move them into, or you're going to just leave them, you know, at home, you know, in a safe that you have at home, or where however you choose to consolidate those documents, making sure that the power of attorney document, if you have it, or your will, or your family trust, that those documents, your supporter or your facilitator knows where they are. Likewise, providing them, whether you provide them the details at 6 weeks or not is up to you, obviously, but at least providing a list of accounts that you have that may need to be addressed or managed during your through hike or in the event of an emergency. Compiling that list. And you want to do this at 6 weeks because you want the individual that you're giving them to become comfortable with them and to be able to ask the questions that they need in order to be comfortable as they execute their piece. So consolidating that information. So that's your legal documentation, also your financial documentation. You also want to follow through with the medical. Ensure that your appointments are scheduled. My personal view is that I prefer to have my medical appointments immediately prior to my departure. If you have more chronic health issues, then maybe you want to have those well in advance, so if there's an issue, it can be addressed and not change your, say, start date. However, if you don't have those chronic issues, my preference would be to have your dental appointments, your eye appointments, your specialists, oncology, dermatology, cardiology, whatever it is, to have those appointments as close to your departure date as possible so that you basically have a clean bill of health going out and you're comfortable and your supporters are comfortable and your facilitators comfortable as you actually approach the trail. Okay, a couple more issues with reservations or notifications, and that is, obviously, you will have wanted to speak with your employer well before the 6 weeks to assess the opportunity to go on leave without pay or some other consideration that potentially continues your employment during and after your through hike. But if that's not the case, then at 6 weeks, you want to start drafting that resignation letter so that you give them sufficient time and you stay in their good graces, either to be re-employed with them or for a reference after the completion of your through hike. So the considerations for your workplace and notification of the workplace at the 6 week point is a critical time. Okay, in addition to those things, almost reaching back to the communication plan, another piece of procurement that you'll want to do at the 6 week point is to go for that AWOLS guide and purchase gut hooks. in order to give you sufficient time to start annotating those things so that when you get on trail, you have as much information as you both want and need. Okay, the second to last thing that I have found helpful was I rewrote why I'm doing the trail. How has that changed over time? Previously with me, it really was entirely focused just on me and sort of rebooting my life after 32 years of employment and a lot of things that had happened. Like, what do I want to take forward in the rest of my life, sort of thing. So there's that sort of cathartic piece to it. But since then, now I'm also involved with the Cancer Research Institute as a charity. So and also giving tribute to Dr. Gelman. So as a consequence, it's been sort of expanded. Why am I doing this? And what are my motivating factors? And what's going to keep me on trail? Where's my passion? So I rewrote that to myself. And I also shared it with my spouse, who in this instance is my supporter, so that when I'm knee-deep in the mud from 4 days of rain or cold or whatever it is that's driving my emotions into the ground, and I'm reaching out for sort of a cathartic conversation, in my instance, my spouse, but your supporter has that as a reference to help define for you why it is you're out there in the first place and why you should stay out there. Or to define, maybe you've met your goals and expectations and you can come off trail. The last thing is just your preparation. It's 6 weeks. You need to up your game, up the ante, and make sure that you're putting in 8 or 10 miles in similar conditions of the PUDs, up and downs, or a little bit longer hike on flat ground so that your health is ready just to go from shelter to shelter. Because if you look at the shelters, you're usually looking somewhere around 7 miles. So certainly a consideration or a goal is to be able to start off and do from shelter to shelter if you had to. A lot of folks are saying, okay, I'm not going to go shelter to shelter, I'm going to camp or whatever. But your other resources, water, privy resources, that sort of thing, also tend to be sort of consolidated around the shelters. So the shelters, no matter what, are milestones, even if you're not actually staying in them. Okay, so those are the issues. So the pre-deployment checklist, I will just put as a list for here. And for other folks, like I don't have kids and that sort of thing, for others of you who have some great wisdom coming from dealing with deployments and having children and other considerations, they'd be fantastic for you to add to this. Do your own video or comment below on other considerations that people have that aren't in my wheelhouse, and to help the rest of the our community out. Beyond that, all I'd like to say is, again, thank you very much. Thank you for subscribing. Hit the subscribe button, doesn't cost you a thing. Hit the like button if this is of any value to you. And I always seriously appreciate the comments. We always have a great back and forth. So I welcome those things, and I just want to say we will see you on trail. Okay, scars out.